The air hung thick and wet over Belle Rive Plantation that August evening in 1846, the kind of Louisiana heat that made even breathing feel like a chore. Cicadas screamed from the live oaks draped in Spanish moss, their chorus mixing with the distant spirituals drifting up from the quarters. Inside the big house, however, silence reigned like a tyrant. Celeste Beauregard sat in her third-floor room, embroidering a pillowcase she would never use. Her fingers, plump and steady, worked the needle through linen, while sweat beaded on her upper lip. At 22 years old, she had perfected the art of invisibility. In a world where her mother, Adeline, commanded every room with porcelain beauty and calculated charm, Celeste had learned that existing quietly was the only way to survive. The mirror across from her chair told truths she'd learned to ignore. Her face was round, her body heavy in all the ways that Southern society deemed unforgivable. Her chestnut hair, thick and lovely, was always pinned back severely. Her eyes, a striking green that she'd inherited from her father's side, rarely met anyone else's. Tell me in the comments which country you are from and what you thought of this story. And if this story made an impression on you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future stories. She had been taught through 1,000 small cruelties that she was something to be ashamed of. Downstairs, she could hear her mother's voice, bright and musical, entertaining the evening's guests. Mrs. Adeline Beauregard was legendary in Baton Rouge society, a woman who had turned widowhood into an art form, maintaining Belle Rive's 600 acres and 200 souls with an iron fist wrapped in silk gloves. Men wanted her, women wanted to be her, and she never let anyone forget it. Celeste set down her embroidery when she heard the footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, purposeful, multiple pairs. Her heart began to hammer in her chest, though she couldn't say why. She was always forgotten during her mother's soirees, left to her room like an embarrassing relic stored in an attic. The door opened without a knock. Adeline stood there, still in her evening gown of emerald silk, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. But her face was different. The mask had slipped. Rage burned in her blue eyes, raw and undisguised. Behind her stood Jeremiah, the house butler, his dark face carefully neutral, and two men Celeste didn't recognize. Field hands, by the look of their rough clothes and calloused hands. "Mother?" Celeste's voice came out small, childlike. Adeline swept into the room like a storm front. "Do you know what happened tonight, Celeste? Do you have any idea of the humiliation you have caused this family?" Celeste's hands trembled in her lap. I was in my room. I haven't—" "Colonel Whitmore's nephew was here." Adeline's voice cracked like a whip. "A Union officer educated at West Point from one of the finest families in Virginia. I arranged everything, the dinner, the conversation, the subtle suggestion that you might be available." She spat the last word like poison. Celeste felt her face burning. "I didn't ask you to—" "He asked to see you. Said he'd heard I had a daughter." Adeline laughed, but it was a broken sound. "Do you know what he said when I described you? He said, and I quote, 'Mrs. Beauregard, I'm sure your daughter has many fine qualities, but I'm looking for a wife who can represent my family with grace and appropriate bearing.'" The words landed like blows. Celeste had heard variations of them before, but never so directly, never with such venom. "He refused you before he even met you," Adeline continued, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than anger. Something cold, based solely on the rumors of what you look like. "Do you understand what that means? It means you have made us a laughingstock. It means that your very existence is a stain on the Beauregard name." "Then let me leave," Celeste whispered. "Give me a small allowance, and I'll go somewhere you'll never have to see me again." "No." Adeline's eyes glittered in the lamplight. "You will not take the coward's way out. You will not make me the mother who cast out her only child. Instead," she turned to the two men standing in the doorway, "you will learn what it means to be desirable. Celeste finally looked at the men. One was tall and lean, with grey threading through his hair, his face marked with old scars. The other was younger, broad-shouldered, with intelligent eyes that seemed uncomfortable with where they found themselves. Both men were staring at the floor, their bodies tense. "Mother, what are you doing?" Celeste stood, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "These are Tobias and Marcus," Adeline said, her voice now terrifyingly calm. "They work the south fields. Tonight they will teach you what men want. They will make you understand desire, need, passion, all the things that should come naturally to a woman but seem to have escaped you entirely." The room tilted. Celeste gripped the back of her chair. "You can't be serious." "I am deadly serious." Adeline walked to the door. "By morning, you will understand what it means to be wanted. You will know what it feels like to be touched, claimed, desired, and perhaps then you will have the confidence to hold your head up in society instead of skulking around like a ghost." "This is madness!" Celeste's voice finally found strength. This is mercy." Adeline cut her off. "Would you prefer I send you to a brothel in New Orleans? Because that can be arranged. At least here, in your own room, you have some dignity." She looked at Jeremiah. "Lock the door from the outside. Let no one disturb them until dawn. Mrs. Beauregard, please." Tobias spoke for the first time, his voice deep and careful. "You will do as you're told, or you'll be sold south by Monday morning, both of you, and your families with you." Adeline's words were bullets. "Do we understand each other?" The two men's faces went ashen. Marcus's jaw clenched so hard Celeste could see the muscles jumping. Tobias closed his eyes briefly, a prayer or a surrender. "Yes, ma'am," they said in unison. Adeline looked at her daughter one last time. "Make yourself useful, Celeste. For once in your miserable life, make yourself worth something." Then she was gone. The door closed with a soft click, and the key turned in the lock with a sound like a tomb sealing. Celeste stood frozen, her mind unable to process what had just happened. The two men remained near the door, neither moving nor speaking. The clock on her mantel ticked loudly in the silence. Outside, someone laughed in the garden, the sound obscene in its normalcy. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. "Miss Celeste," he said softly, "we ain't gonna hurt you." Tobias nodded, his scarred face gentle. "We ain't gonna do nothing you don't want. I don't care what she said. I don't care what she threatened. Some lines a man don't cross, no matter what." Celeste felt something crack inside her chest. She had expected violence, degradation, pain. She had prepared herself to endure whatever was coming. But kindness, respect, these were weapons she had no defense against. She collapsed back into her chair, and for the first time in years, Celeste Beauregard began to cry. Not the quiet, hidden tears she'd shed alone so many nights, but great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Years of loneliness, shame, and isolation poured out of her like a dam breaking. And these two men, these enslaved souls, who had every reason to hate her family, to use this moment for revenge, they simply waited. They gave her space to break. They offered her the first true mercy she had ever known. When she finally raised her head, her face blotchy and her eyes swollen, she found them sitting on the floor near the door, giving her as much distance as the room allowed. Tobias was whittling a small piece of wood with a knife he'd pulled from his pocket. Marcus was humming something low and sad. "Why?" Celeste's voice was hoarse. "Why aren't you—" "Because we're men, Miss Celeste," Tobias said simply. "Not animals, and you ain't never done nothing to us but treat us with a bit of kindness when others wouldn't." Marcus nodded. "You remember last spring, when I took sick and couldn't work. You brought medicine to my wife yourself. Didn't send no servant, came yourself." Celeste barely remembered it. It had seemed like nothing at the time. "Things like that matter," Marcus continued, "and we ain't gonna repay kindness with cruelty. Not tonight, not ever." The night stretched ahead of them, long and uncertain. Outside, the party continued, oblivious. And inside this locked room, three souls trapped by different chains began to understand that freedom sometimes starts in the most unlikely places, with a kindness nobody expected, in a moment nobody believed could be true. The first hour passed in silence, so complete that Celeste could hear the wax dripping from the candles on her dresser. She remained in her chair by the window, occasionally glancing at the two men who had settled themselves as far from her as the room's dimensions allowed. They sat with their backs against the wall near the door, their long legs stretched out in front of them, their faces tilted toward the floor, as if studying the pattern in the wood planks could reveal some escape from this impossible situation. Tobias had finished whittling his small piece of wood, a bird, Celeste realized, when he set it gently on the floor beside him. His hands, scarred and calloused from decades of fieldwork, had created something delicate and beautiful. She found herself staring at those hands, wondering how many other talents, how many other parts of himself had been buried under the weight of bondage. "How long have you been at Belle Rive?" The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. Both men looked up, surprised. Marcus exchanged a glance with Tobias, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, Tobias answered, "I was born here, Miss Celeste. 47 years this October. My mama worked in the kitchen when your grandfather ran this place. And you," she looked at Marcus. 10 years, he said. His voice was younger, warmer than Tobias's gravelly tone. "I was at Oakmont Plantation before your mother bought me. Brought my wife and son with me. That was the only reason I came without fighting." Celeste felt a hollowness in her chest. "You have a son?" "Isaiah. He's 9 now. Smart as a whip. Picks up everything quick." Marcus's face transformed when he spoke of his child, pride lighting his features. "His mama's teaching him letters when she can, though we have to be careful about it. But that boy's gonna be something special. I know it." "My daughter reads," Tobias added quietly. "She's a house girl now, works with the laundry, but she's got a mind for numbers too. Can count better than most white folks I've seen." The absurdity of the situation struck Celeste with full force. Here they were, locked in a room where violence was expected, perhaps demanded, and instead they were talking about children, about talents hidden and hopes deferred, about the small, precious things that made life bearable, even in the most unbearable circumstances. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For what, Miss Celeste?" Marcus asked gently. "For all of this, for being part of it, for my mother, for—" Her voice broke. "For existing in a world that requires your suffering so that I can sit here in silk dresses and embroider useless pillowcases." Tobias shook his head slowly. "You didn't make this world, but I benefit from it." "That you do," Tobias agreed. "But you didn't choose it any more than we did. You were born into your cage, same as we were born into ours. They just look different is all." Celeste wanted to protest, to say that her suffering couldn't possibly compare to theirs. But looking at these two men, seeing the way they'd been weaponized against her, the way her mother had used their very existence as a tool of humiliation, she began to understand something she'd never considered before. They were all trapped in a system that devoured humanity for profit and power. The chains looked different, the cruelties varied, but the machine ground them all down just the same. "Tell me about your lives," she said suddenly. "Please. We have until dawn. Tell me who you really are when no one's watching." Marcus and Tobias exchanged another look, longer this time. Then, slowly, as if testing the ice on a frozen pond, Marcus began to speak. "I wanted to be a carpenter," he said. "When I was young, before I understood what being enslaved really meant, I used to watch the free black carpenter who'd come through Oakmont sometimes. The way he'd measure wood, the way he'd join pieces together so smooth you couldn't see the seam. I thought that was magic. I thought if I could learn to do that, I could make beautiful things, things that would last." "You still could," Celeste said. "I mean, not here, but where, Miss Celeste?" Marcus's voice wasn't angry, just tired. Where could a black man in Louisiana own a carpentry shop? Where could he sell his wares? Who would hire him? The law won't even let us learn to read in most parishes. They hanged a man in Natchez last year for teaching his children their letters. The words settled over the room like ash. Celeste had known these things intellectually, had heard the laws discussed at dinner parties, had seen the casual cruelties enacted every day, but she'd never sat in a locked room with the men whose dreams had been strangled by those laws. She'd never had to look directly at the cost of her comfort. "I wanted to travel," Tobias said into the heavy silence. "That sounds foolish, I know. But when I was a boy, we had an overseer who'd been to Africa. He'd tell stories about it sometimes when he was drinking, talked about cities made of gold, about animals bigger than houses, about trees that touch the sky. I used to dream about seeing those things, about walking on ground my ancestors walked on." "That's not foolish," Celeste said fiercely. "That's beautiful." "It's impossible," Tobias corrected gently. "I'll die here at Belle Rive, same as my mama did. Same as her mama did. My bones will go into this Louisiana soil, and nobody will remember I ever wanted anything different." Celeste stood abruptly, startling both men. She walked to her bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines of volumes she'd read a dozen times each. "I have books about Africa," she said. "Well, written by white men who went there, so probably full of lies and exaggerations. But there are pictures, drawings of the places they saw." She pulled down a thick volume. "And this one, it's about carpentry techniques from different cultures, cathedral builders in Europe, temple craftsmen in the Orient." She carried the books to the men, kneeling down on the floor between them. The informality of it, the way she lowered herself to their level, felt revolutionary. "We can't undo what's been done," she said. "We can't fix this broken world tonight. But we can share what we know. We can tell each other the truth about who we are and what we've wanted. We can be real with each other." Marcus reached out slowly, his hand hovering over the carpentry book as if it might burn him. "Your mother finds out you showed us books. She'll sell us faster than you can blink." "My mother," Celeste said with sudden steel in her voice, "sent you here to rape me. I don't think her opinion matters much anymore, do you?" The word hung in the air, stark and ugly. Celeste had never said anything so crude out loud before. But there was no polite way to describe what Adeline had intended, no genteel southern euphemism that could soften that particular brutality. Tobias let out a long breath. "No, miss, I suppose it doesn't." "Then look at the books," Celeste said. "Tell me your stories. Let's make this night something different than what she wanted." And so they did. For hours, they sat on the floor of Celeste's bedroom, the social order that governed every other moment of their lives temporarily suspended. Marcus traced the diagrams of joints and joinery with reverent fingers, asking questions about techniques and materials. Tobias studied the drawings of African landscapes, his eyes drinking in every detail as if he could memorize his way to freedom. Celeste, in turn, listened to their stories. She learned about Tobias's mother, who had sung songs from her own mother's childhood, keeping alive a language and culture that predated the ships that brought them here. She learned about Marcus's wife, Sarah, who could cure almost any ailment with herbs and prayer, who held their small family together through sheer force of will and love. "She sounds remarkable," Celeste said. "She is," Marcus agreed. "When I told her I'd been chosen for this tonight, she knew what your mother intended. She held my face in her hands and said, 'You come back to me with your soul intact. Whatever happens, you keep your humanity.' That's what she said. Your humanity." "She was right to say it," Tobias added. "That's what they try to take from us every day, not just our freedom or our labor, our humanity. They want us to believe we're less than human, that we don't feel or dream or love the way they do, but we do. Lord knows we do." Celeste felt tears threatening again, but she blinked them back. "I've been so blind," she whispered. I've been living in this house my whole life, and I've never really seen any of you. Not really. You've been like furniture to me, part of the landscape, and that's unforgivable." "You were taught not to see," Marcus said. "From the time you were a baby, you were taught that we don't matter. That's how the system works. It makes good people blind." "I'm not good," Celeste said bitterly. "I'm cowardly and weak, and I've let my mother control every aspect of my life because I was too afraid to stand up to her." "Maybe," Tobias said. "Or maybe you just didn't know you had any other choice. Sometimes we don't find our courage until we're forced to." The candles burned lower. Outside, the sounds of the party had long since faded. The house had settled into its nighttime rhythms, the old wood creaking as it cooled, the cicadas singing their endless song. In the locked room, three people who should have been enemies discovered they were something more complicated, something that didn't have a name in the twisted social vocabulary of the antebellum South. They were becoming, against all odds and expectations, something like friends. "What happens at dawn?" Celeste asked as the first grey light began to show at the edges of the curtains. "You tell your mother whatever you need to tell her," Tobias said. "We'll back up whatever story keeps you safe." "And you?" Celeste looked between them. "What keeps you safe?" Marcus smiled sadly. "There ain't no safe for us, Miss Celeste. There's just surviving one day and hoping for another. That's been true since before tonight, and it'll be true after." "No," Celeste said, surprised by the certainty in her own voice. "No, that's not good enough. That can't be all there is." "What else can there be?" Tobias asked. Celeste stood, her mind racing. "I don't know yet, but something. There has to be something I can do, some way I can help." "You just being decent to us is help enough," Marcus said. "More than most would do." But Celeste shook her head. Decency wasn't enough. Not anymore. Not after tonight. Something had cracked open inside her, some understanding that she couldn't unknow. These men had shown her mercy when they had every reason not to. They had treated her with dignity when her own mother had stripped her of it. And now, as dawn approached and the impossible night came to its end, Celeste Beauregard felt something she'd never felt before. She felt angry, not at herself, not at her body, not at her perceived failures, but at the system that had created this moment, at the laws and customs that had made these good men into property, at the casual cruelties that everyone accepted as normal, natural, ordained by God and nature, at her mother, who had tried to use violence to reshape her into something acceptable. And as the sun rose over Belle Rive Plantation on that August morning in 1846, Celeste made a decision that would change all of their lives forever. She would no longer be invisible. She would no longer hide. Whatever it cost, whatever it took, she would find a way to be free, and if she could manage it, she would take these two men with her. The key turned in the lock at precisely 6 o'clock in the morning. Jeremiah opened the door slowly, his weathered face carefully blank as he took in the scene before him. Celeste sat in her chair by the window, her hair unpinned and falling loose around her shoulders, her dress rumpled but intact. Tobias and Marcus stood near the far wall, their faces exhausted but calm. The room smelled of candle wax and old books, not violence, not shame. "Mrs. Beauregard requests your presence in the study, Miss Celeste," Jeremiah said quietly. "Immediately." His eyes flickered to the two men. "You two, back to the quarters. Say nothing to anyone about where you've been." "Wait," Celeste said, her voice stronger than it had ever been. "I need to dress properly first. Tell my mother I'll be down in 30 minutes. Jeremiah's eyebrows rose fractionally. In 22 years, he'd never heard Celeste Beauregard issue a direct order, never heard her delay or deny Adeline's commands. "Miss Celeste, your mother was quite clear. 30 minutes, Celeste repeated. "She's kept me waiting my entire life. She can wait half an hour." Something flickered in Jeremiah's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. He nodded slowly. "I'll inform her." He gestured to Tobias and Marcus. "Come on, then." As the two men moved toward the door, Marcus paused beside Celeste's chair. "Thank you," he whispered, so low only she could hear, "for seeing us." Tobias touched his forehead in a gesture that was part respect, part solidarity. Then they were gone, and Celeste was alone. She went to her wash basin and splashed cold water on her face, studying herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red from crying, her face puffy from lack of sleep, but something had changed. Some essential shift had occurred behind her eyes. She looked, for the first time in her life, like someone who knew her own mind. She chose her dress carefully, a dark blue day dress, simple but well made, with none of the frills and flounces her mother preferred. She pinned her hair up in a severe style that emphasized her face rather than tried to distract from it. No jewelry except her grandmother's wedding ring, which she wore on a chain around her neck. When she looked at herself again, she saw not a shameful disappointment, but a woman preparing for battle. The walk down the stairs felt like descending into a lion's den. The house was quiet, the servants moving through their morning routines with the practiced silence of people who knew how to be invisible. Celeste could feel their eyes on her as she passed, could sense the questions they were too wise to ask aloud. The study door was closed. Celeste knocked once, firmly, then entered without waiting for permission. Adeline stood by the window, still wearing her dressing gown, her usually perfect hair loose around her shoulders. She looked older in the morning light, the lines around her mouth and eyes more pronounced. When she turned to face her daughter, her expression was complex, anger certainly, but also something that might have been anticipation or dread. "Close the door," Adeline said. Celeste did, then remained standing near it, her hands folded in front of her. "Well," Adeline's voice was sharp, "I assume you've come to thank me." "Thank you," Celeste repeated, genuinely confused. "For arranging your education, for ensuring that you finally understand what it means to be a woman." Adeline crossed to her desk, where a crystal decanter of whiskey sat despite the early hour. She poured herself a drink. "I trust the experience was illuminating." Celeste felt that anger from earlier rising in her chest again, hot and clean. "You sent 2 men to my room with the intention that they raped me, and you think I should thank you?" Adeline's hand froze, the glass halfway to her lips. "Don't be vulgar, Celeste. I did no such thing." "What would you call it, Mother? You locked us in a room together. You threatened them with being sold if they didn't comply. You told them to make me desirable. What exactly did you think was going to happen?" "I thought," Adeline said, her voice dropping to something dangerous, "that you would finally learn that your body is not something to be ashamed of, that men can desire you, that you can be wanted. I was trying to give you confidence." "By having me assaulted? By using enslaved men as weapons against your own daughter?" Adeline slammed the glass down on the desk, the crystal ringing out sharply. "You don't understand. You've never understood. Do you know what it's been like for me, having a daughter who refuses to even try, who hides herself away like a ghost, who makes me look like a failure every time someone asks why I haven't married you off?" "There it is," Celeste said quietly. "The truth. This was never about me. It was about you, about your reputation, about what people think. Of course it's about what people think." Adeline's composure was cracking. "That's all that matters in this world. Reputation, appearance, standing. That's what keeps us alive. That's what maintains this plantation, feeds the servants, keeps the roof over our heads. Without society's approval, we're nothing." "Then I choose nothing," Celeste said. "I choose to be nothing in your world, rather than something in it at the cost of my soul." Adeline stared at her daughter as if seeing her for the first time. "What are you talking about?" "I'm leaving, Mother. I'm leaving Belle Rive, and I'm never coming back." The words hung in the air between them. Outside, a mockingbird began its morning song, oblivious to the earthquake happening in the study. "You're being dramatic," Adeline said, but her voice wavered. "You're upset, which is understandable, but I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. Celeste felt the words flowing from some deep place she hadn't known existed. "Last night, you tried to break me. You used the most horrible method you could imagine to try to reshape me into what you wanted. But you failed, because those two men showed me more kindness, more humanity, more genuine care in one night than you've shown me in 22 years. Adeline's face went white. "How dare you? How dare I? How dare you?" Celeste's voice rose for the first time. "You're my mother. You were supposed to protect me, to love me, to help me find my way in the world. Instead, you've spent my entire life making me feel worthless because I don't look like you, because I'm not the pretty doll you wanted to show off." "I gave you everything," Adeline shouted back. "This house, education, clothes, food, comfort. What more did you want?" "I wanted you to love me," Celeste said simply. "I wanted my mother to look at me and see something worth loving. That's all. That's all I ever wanted." The fight went out of Adeline like air from a punctured balloon. She sank into the chair behind her desk, suddenly looking every one of her 43 years. "I don't know how to do that," she whispered. "I don't know how to love someone I don't understand." "Then let me go," Celeste said. "Let me find people who do understand. Let me build a life that doesn't require your approval or society's acceptance." "You'll be ruined," Adeline said, but there was no force behind it. "No decent family will take you in. No man will marry you. You'll end up free," Celeste finished. "I'll end up free. And that's worth more than all the respectability in Louisiana." A long silence fell. Through the study windows, Celeste could see the plantation waking up, slaves heading to the fields, the kitchen house smoking as breakfast was prepared, the endless machinery of Belle Rive grinding forward as it had for generations. "What do you want?" Adeline finally asked, her voice hollow. "I want what's mine by law," Celeste said. She had thought about this during her 30 minutes of preparation, had worked out the details in her mind. "Grandmother Beauregard left me an inheritance in her will, $10,000 in a trust, to be released when I married or turned 25. I want it now." "You're not 25, Adeline said automatically. "No, but I'm your only heir. And if I'm leaving anyway, if I'm removing myself from society, then I'm releasing you from the burden of my support. $10,000 is a small price to pay to be rid of me, isn't it?" Adeline flinched at the bluntness of it. "And if I refuse, then I'll go to every church, every social gathering, every parlor in Baton Rouge, and tell them exactly what you did last night. I'll tell them how Mrs. Adeline Beauregard, the grande dame of Belle Rive, sent 2 enslaved men to her daughter's room with orders to assault her. I'll tell them how you used human beings as tools of punishment. I'll ruin you so thoroughly that even your beauty and charm won't be enough to save you." It was a bluff, mostly. Celeste wasn't sure she had the courage to actually do it, but her mother didn't need to know that. Adeline's hands shook as she poured herself another drink. "You're not the girl I raised." "No," Celeste agreed. "I'm not. That girl died last night. The woman standing here is someone new, someone who finally understands that your love was never worth the price you demanded for it." "What will you do?" Adeline asked. "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet," Celeste admitted. "But I'll figure it out. And, Mother, there's one more thing I want." Adeline looked up, wary. "What?" "Tobias and Marcus. I want them freed. I want their manumission papers drawn up, properly witnessed, and filed with the parish. I want their families freed with them." "Absolutely not," Adeline stood abruptly. "Do you have any idea what that would cost? What people would say? I'd be accused of abolitionism, of doing the right thing," Celeste suggested. "Yes, I imagine you would be. But you're going to do it anyway, because if you don't, I will tell the world that those 2 men spent the night in my room. And even though nothing happened, even though they showed me nothing but kindness and respect, the rumor alone will destroy them. They'll be sold south, separated from their families, worked to death in some Mississippi cotton field. Their children will grow up without fathers, and it will be your fault. You're threatening me." Adeline said wonderingly. "You're actually threatening me." "I'm negotiating," Celeste corrected. "You taught me how, remember? All those dinner parties where I watched you manipulate people into doing what you wanted? All those conversations where you traded favors and information like currency? I learned from the best, Mother. I just never had a reason to use those lessons before." Adeline sank back into her chair, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. "You've changed." "Yes, I have, and I have you to thank for it." "Because you were right about one thing. Last night was illuminating, just not in the way you intended." The morning sun continued its climb. Somewhere in the house a clock chimed 7 times. The plantation day was fully underway now, and decisions needed to be made. $10,000, Adeline finally said, "and the freedom papers for 2 families. That's what you want for your silence and your absence?" "Yes." "You'll leave Louisiana. You won't come back and cause trouble?" "I'll leave Louisiana," Celeste confirmed, "and I'll never come back. Belle Rive and everything it represents will be dead to me." Adeline picked up a pen, pulling paper toward her. "Give me a week. I'll need to liquidate some assets, arrange the legal documents. The freedom papers will take time to process properly." 3 days, Celeste countered. "You can move quickly when you want to, Mother. I've seen you do it." A ghost of Adeline's old smile flickered across her face. "You really did learn from me." She began writing. 3 days, then. But Celeste, when you're out there in the world, when you realize how hard it is without protection or family or society's blessing, don't come back. Don't think you can return here and resume your place. Once you leave, you're truly gone. That's what freedom means, Celeste said. And I'm ready for it. She turned to go, but Adeline's voice stopped her at the door. "Celeste!" She turned back. Her mother was staring at the papers in front of her, not meeting her daughter's eyes. "I did love you," Adeline said quietly. "In my own way. I didn't know how to love someone who wasn't like me. I didn't know how to love someone I couldn't understand." Celeste felt a complicated knot of emotions tighten in her chest. Grief, anger, pity, and something that might have been forgiveness, though it was too soon to tell. "Maybe that's the saddest part of all," Celeste replied. "Because if you'd tried to understand me instead of trying to change me, you might have discovered that I was worth loving exactly as I was." She left the study before her mother could respond, closing the door softly behind her. 3 days. She had 3 days to prepare for a future she couldn't yet imagine. 3 days to pack up a lifetime lived in shadows. 3 days to become someone new. As she climbed the stairs back to her room, Celeste felt the weight of the house around her. All its history, all its cruelty, all its carefully maintained illusions of grandeur built on the backs of human suffering. In 3 days, she would walk out those doors and never return. And though she was terrified, though she had no clear plan and no certainty about what came next, Celeste Beauregard felt something she'd never felt before. She felt alive. The 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality, as if Belle Rive had become a stage where everyone knew their lines, but no longer believed in the play. Adeline moved through the house like a ghost, attending to business with mechanical efficiency, but avoiding her daughter entirely. Celeste spent her time sorting through her possessions, deciding what to take and what to leave behind, each choice a small act of defining who she wanted to become. On the morning of the 2nd day, Jeremiah knocked softly on her door. When she opened it, he stood with his hat in his hands, his dignified face etched with concern. "Miss Celeste, if I may have a word." She gestured him inside. He'd been the butler at Belle Rive for over 30 years, had served her grandfather and now her mother with unwavering discretion. She'd never really looked at him before, not as a person, not as someone with thoughts and opinions and a life beyond his service. "I understand you're leaving us," he said carefully. "News travels fast," Celeste observed. "In a house like this, secrets are impossible." He hesitated, then continued. I also understand that you've arranged for Tobias and Marcus to be freed and their families. Yes, the papers are being drawn up now. Jeremiah's hands tightened on his hat. That was a good thing you did, Miss Celeste. A brave thing. Those are good men with good families. They deserve better than this place can offer them. Everyone deserves better than what this place offers, Celeste said softly. He nodded slowly. There's talk in the quarters about what your mother did that night. About what those men did instead. He met her eyes directly. People are saying that you treated them with kindness, that you saw them as men, not property. That matters, Miss Celeste. That matters more than you might think. Celeste felt her throat tighten. I did nothing special, Jeremiah. I just talked to them. Like human beings. That's more than most would do. And because of it, because word has spread about how you handled that night, there are people in the quarters who want to help you. People who want to make sure you're safe when you leave here. She frowned. I don't understand. How could they help me? Jeremiah reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a list of names and places. Free black communities, sympathetic churches, abolition societies, places where a woman traveling alone might find safe harbor, especially a woman who's shown herself to be different from other white folks. Celeste took the paper with trembling hands. How did you get this? We have our own networks, Miss Celeste, our own ways of sharing information, of helping each other survive. You think we don't know about the Underground Railroad, about the safe houses and the sympathizers? We know everything that matters. We have to. She unfolded the paper and saw a dozen names written in careful script, along with locations throughout Louisiana and into the Free States. Who wrote this? My wife. She reads and writes better than most white folks, though we keep that quiet for obvious reasons. He smiled slightly. She says to tell you that education is the key to everything, that if you're going to make a new life, you should use it to help others learn. There's a Quaker school in Philadelphia that takes female teachers. She wrote to them already, said she knew a woman of good character who might be interested in a position. Celeste stared at him, overwhelmed. Why would you do this for me? Because you freed 2 families, Jeremiah said simply. Because you could have used those men to hurt your mother, to take revenge, to cause all kinds of trouble. Instead, you used your power to set people free. That tells me something about your character. And in a world as dark as this one, we help people with good character when we find them. Before she could stop herself, Celeste reached out and took Jeremiah's hand. He startled at the contact. Such familiarity between white and black, employer and servant, was unthinkable. But she held on. Thank you, she said. Thank you for seeing me, for helping me, for being part of whatever this new beginning turns out to be. Jeremiah squeezed her hand once, briefly, then stepped back. You should leave Louisiana as quickly as you can, once you have your money. Your mother has friends who might not appreciate what you've done. The manumission of slaves is controversial, and a white woman traveling alone will attract attention. Be careful, Miss Celeste. I will. I promise. After he left, Celeste sat on her bed and studied the list of names. Each one represented a lifeline, a possibility, a door opening to a world she'd never imagined. Philadelphia. The very word felt like a prayer. That evening, as the sun set over the cotton fields, turning everything gold and amber, there was another knock at her door. This time it was 2 women, Sarah, Marcus's wife, and Dinah, Tobias's daughter. They came in carrying a large basket covered with a cloth. Miss Celeste, Sarah said, her voice warm and musical, we brought you some things for your journey. They laid out the contents on her bed. Bread wrapped in wax paper, dried meat, preserves in small jars, a warm shawl, a sturdy traveling dress in dark wool, and a beautiful quilt made from dozens of different fabric scraps, each piece telling its own story. This is too much, Celeste protested. You can't give me... We can, and we will, Dinah interrupted gently. She was tall like her father, with the same intelligent eyes. My father told us what you did that night. How you treated them like men instead of animals. How you shared your books, your stories, your time. How you saw them. And now you're freeing them," Sarah added. "Freeing my husband, my son, our whole family. Do you know what that means? Do you understand what you've given us?" Celeste felt tears threatening. "I only did what should have been done years ago. What should never have been necessary in the first place. But you did it," Sarah insisted. "You used your power for good. And we won't forget that. None of us will." Dinah picked up the quilt, running her hands over the stitching. "Every woman in the quarters contributed a piece to this. We worked on it together these past 2 days. Each square represents a different family, a different story. We want you to carry us with you, Miss Celeste. We want you to remember that you made a difference here, even if Belle Rive itself is rotten to the core." "I don't know what to say," Celeste whispered. "Say you'll be careful," Sarah urged. "Say you'll find a good life out there in the world. Say you'll remember that kindness matters, that seeing people matters, that small acts of mercy can change everything." "I promise," Celeste said. "I promise all of that." The women embraced her then, briefly but fiercely, and in that moment Celeste felt more connected to humanity than she ever had in her mother's elegant parlor or at her carefully orchestrated social gatherings. These women, who had every reason to hate her, had chosen instead to help her, had chosen to see her struggle and her courage and honor it with their own. After they left, Celeste wrapped herself in the quilt and cried, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she was not alone, that even in leaving everything she'd known, she was being sent off with blessings and prayers and hopes from people she'd never truly seen until now. On the third day, Adeline summoned her to the study one final time. The money was there, $10,000 in banknotes and gold coins, more money than Celeste had ever seen at once. The manumission papers were there too, properly signed and witnessed, along with letters of transit that would allow Tobias, Marcus and their families to travel freely. "I've arranged for a carriage to take you to Baton Rouge," Adeline said, her voice professionally neutral. "From there you can catch a steamboat north. I suggest you travel as a widow. It will explain your lack of male protection and give you a respectable cover story." "Thank you, Mother." Adeline's jaw tightened at the word. "I've also prepared letters of introduction to several families in New Orleans and Natchez, should you need them, though if you use them, you'll be expected to maintain certain standards of behavior. No talk of abolition or freedom or any of these dangerous ideas you've developed. I won't need them," Celeste said. "I'm going north, all the way north. To do what? Become a school teacher? Live in some boarding house like a spinster? Maybe. Or maybe I'll do something no one expects. Maybe I'll surprise everyone, including myself." Adeline stood and walked to the window, her back to her daughter. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then so quietly Celeste almost missed it, her mother said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." "I hope you do too, Mother." "I already have everything I want," Adeline replied. "This house, this position, this life, it's all I ever wanted." "Then I'm glad one of us got what we wanted," Celeste said. She gathered the money and papers, tucking them carefully into the traveling bag Sarah had given her. "Goodbye, Mother. I hope you find some peace." She left before Adeline could respond, walking through the grand foyer of Belle Rive for the last time. The servants had gathered, not all of them, but enough. Jeremiah stood by the door. Sarah and her son Isaiah were there, the boy clutching his father's hand. Dinah stood with her mother. Others she recognized from years of passing them in hallways, of seeing them work in gardens and kitchens, of living parallel lives that never truly intersected. Until now. "Thank you," she said to all of them. "Thank you for helping me see. Thank you for teaching me what courage looks like. Thank you for showing me that mercy and kindness are stronger than cruelty." "Go with God, Miss Celeste," someone called out. "Make it mean something." another voice added. She stepped out into the bright Louisiana morning, where a carriage waited to carry her away from everything she'd ever known. As they pulled away from Belle Rive, she looked back one final time at the grand plantation house with its white columns and manicured gardens, its carefully maintained illusion of grace and gentility built on a foundation of suffering. She would never see it again. And that was exactly how it should be. The road ahead was uncertain. The future was unwritten. But for the first time in her life, Celeste Beauregard was free to write her own story. And it began with two words she'd never been able to say before. I choose. The steamboat Maria Dubois cut through the muddy waters of the Mississippi River like a knife through butter, its great paddle wheel churning endlessly as it carried its cargo of passengers, cotton and commerce northward. Celeste stood at the railing of the second-class deck, watching Louisiana slip away behind her, the cypress swamps and cotton fields gradually giving way to different landscapes, different possibilities. She traveled under the name Mrs. Celeste Whitmore, a widow mourning her late husband, killed in a steamboat explosion 2 years prior. The story came easily, too easily perhaps, suggesting that she had more talent for deception than she'd realized. The black mourning dress she wore was authentic enough, borrowed from Belle Rive's attic where her grandmother's things still lingered. It had the added benefit of discouraging conversation, as most people respected a widow's grief and left her alone. Which suited Celeste perfectly. She needed time to think, to plan, to figure out who she was going to become. The money was hidden in multiple places, sewn into the lining of her traveling bag, tucked into her corset, divided among her possessions so that losing one piece wouldn't mean losing everything. Jeremiah had taught her that trick before she left, along with several others. Never trust anyone completely, he'd said, not even people who seem kind. The world is full of folks who'll take advantage of a woman traveling alone. She'd been on the river for 3 days now, and already she'd seen the truth of his words. Men who looked at her with calculating eyes, weighing her value. Women who whispered behind their fans, making assumptions about a large woman traveling without male protection. The constant wearing vigilance of being vulnerable in a world designed to prey on vulnerability. But she'd also seen kindness. An elderly black freedman who'd helped her with her bags in Natchez, refusing payment but accepting her thanks. A Quaker couple from Pennsylvania who'd invited her to share their simple meal, sensing her loneliness. A young mother traveling with 3 children who'd welcome Celeste's help, entertaining the little ones during a long afternoon. The world, she was discovering, was more complicated than Belle Rive had prepared her for. More dangerous, yes, but also more full of unexpected grace. On the 4th day out of Baton Rouge, the steamboat stopped at Memphis to take on more passengers and cargo. Celeste went ashore briefly, needing to feel solid ground beneath her feet, needing to break the monotony of the constant river journey. The city was loud and bustling, full of cotton factors and rivermen, merchants and slaves, the whole machinery of commerce grinding away beneath a hot Tennessee sun. She was browsing a bookshop, one of the few acceptable public places a woman could go alone, when she heard a familiar voice. Miss Celeste? Miss Celeste Beauregard? Her heart seized. She turned slowly to find Marcus standing in the doorway of the shop, wearing new clothes she'd never seen before, a free man's papers visible in his breast pocket. Beside him stood Sarah and Isaiah, all 3 dressed in the simple but dignified clothing of free black people. Mrs. Whitmore? Celeste corrected gently, glancing around to make sure no one was paying attention. My name is Mrs. Whitmore now. Understanding flashed in Marcus's eyes. Of course. Forgive me, ma'am. I thought you were someone I once knew. They stood awkwardly for a moment, the social rules unclear. Then Sarah stepped forward. Perhaps we could all use some air. There's a public garden not far from here where freedmen are allowed. We could walk there? Celeste nodded, purchasing a book she didn't need as cover, and followed them out into the Memphis streets. The public garden was small and not particularly well maintained, but it offered bench seats and relative privacy. They sat together, maintaining a careful distance that wouldn't attract hostile attention. "I didn't expect to see you," Celeste said. "I thought you'd go west, maybe to Texas or the territories." "We're going to Ohio," Marcus explained. "Sarah has a sister there who settled in Cincinnati after she was freed. There's a community of free black folks there, people who help newcomers get established. I'm hoping to find carpentry work." "We wanted to thank you one more time," Sarah added, "to say goodbye properly. We didn't get the chance before you left Belle Rive." Isaiah, who'd been sitting quietly, suddenly spoke up. "Are you sad?" "Isaiah," Sarah admonished. "That's not polite." But Celeste smiled at the boy. "It's a fair question. Am I sad? Yes, sometimes I'm scared too and lonely, but I'm also hopeful. Does that make sense?" Isaiah nodded solemnly. "Papa says hope is what keeps us going, even when things are hard. Your papa is a wise man." They talked for nearly an hour, sharing their plans and fears. Marcus and Sarah were terrified of being kidnapped by slave catchers, despite their papers. Celeste was worried about running out of money, about finding legitimate work, about navigating a world she didn't understand. But they also shared their dreams. Marcus's carpentry shop, Sarah's hope that Isaiah could attend a real school, Celeste's vague but growing idea that she wanted to teach, to help others learn to read and think and question. "The Quakers have schools in Philadelphia," Sarah said. "Schools for black children and white children both, sometimes even in the same building. If you go there, if you teach there, you'd be doing real good in the world." "That's the list Jeremiah's wife gave me," Celeste confirmed. "I've been studying it every night, trying to decide where to go first." "Go to Philadelphia," Marcus urged. "It's the safest city in the North for all of us. There are laws against kidnapping there, people who'll stand up for freedmen's rights. And the Quakers, they're not perfect, but they practice what they preach about all people being equal in God's eyes." "Maybe we'll see you there," Sarah added. "Cincinnati isn't so far from Philadelphia. Maybe once we're settled, once we've built our new lives, we'll all meet again." "I'd like that," Celeste said, and meant it. When the steamboat whistle blew, signaling imminent departure, they stood. For a moment they all hesitated, bound by affection, but separated by the social rules that governed even free people's interactions across racial lines. Then Celeste made a decision. She embraced Sarah quickly, then Marcus, then knelt down to hug Isaiah. "Be safe," she whispered, "all of you. Build good lives, be happy." "You too, Mrs. Whitmore," Marcus corrected himself. "You too." She watched them walk away into the Memphis streets, 3 free people among thousands, their papers precious cargo, their futures uncertain, but their own. Then she returned to the steamboat and continued her journey north. St. Louis came and went. The river narrowed and widened. The landscape changed. She saw things she'd only read about in books, rolling hills, different trees, weather that wasn't the oppressive heat of Louisiana. She met more people, heard more stories, began to understand that the world was vastly larger and more diverse than Belle Rive had ever suggested. One evening, sitting in the common room of the steamboat, she struck up a conversation with the Quaker couple she'd met earlier, Abraham and Patience Garrison, returning to Philadelphia after visiting family in the West. Patience, a small woman with kind eyes and a backbone of steel, studied Celeste carefully. "Thee seems troubled, friend," she said in the Quaker's distinctive plain speech. "I'm searching," Celeste admitted. "I've left behind everything I knew, and I'm trying to figure out what comes next." "What did thee leave behind?" Abraham asked gently. And somehow, perhaps because these were strangers she'd never see again, perhaps because the river journey had worn down her defenses, Celeste found herself telling the truth, not all of it. Some secrets needed to stay buried, but enough. She told them about Belle Rive, about her mother's cruelty, about learning to see enslaved people as human beings rather than property. She told them about fleeing, about choosing freedom over respectability. "And now thee wishes to teach?" Patience asked when Celeste had finished. "I think so. I'm not sure I'd be any good at it, but I want to try. I want to help people learn, the way I finally learned." Abraham and Patience exchanged a look. "We run a school in Philadelphia," Abraham said. "The Garrison Academy. We teach children of all backgrounds, the wealthy and the poor, white and black, anyone whose parents want them educated. We could use another teacher, especially a woman who understands what it means to have her eyes open to injustice." Celeste's heart began to pound. "You're offering me a position, just like that." "We believe that God puts people in our path for a reason," Patience explained. "Thee has shown courage in leaving thy old life. Thee has shown compassion in how thee speaks of those who were enslaved. And thee has shown humility in admitting thee doesn't have all the answers. These are the qualities we seek in our teachers." "But I'm not a Quaker," Celeste protested. "I'm not even sure what I believe anymore." "We don't require our teachers to be friends," Abraham assured her. "Only that they respect our principles of equality, simplicity, and truth." "Can thee do that? Could she?" Celeste thought about Tobias and Marcus, about Sarah and Dinah, about all the people at Belle Rive who'd shown her what real dignity looked like. She thought about Jeremiah's wife, teaching herself to read and write despite the laws against it. She thought about Isaiah's eager young face, hungry for knowledge and opportunity. "Yes," she said, "yes, I can do that. Then when we reach Philadelphia, thee will come with us to the school. We'll provide room and board while thee learns our methods. The pay isn't grand, but it's honest work, important work, and thee will be part of a community that values what thee values." Celeste felt tears welling up, but this time they were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me, for giving me a chance. Everyone deserves a chance to start over," Patience said simply. "Everyone deserves the opportunity to become who they were meant to be." The steamboat continued north, leaving the slave states behind, crossing into territory where the very air felt different. Freer, somehow, though Celeste knew that freedom was more complicated than geography. But it was a start. It was a new beginning. As they passed into Pennsylvania, Celeste stood at the railing one last time, watching the river flow endlessly southward, back toward everything she'd left behind. She thought about her mother, alone in Belle Rive's grand house. She thought about Tobias, hopefully somewhere in the West building a new life. She thought about all the people still enslaved, still suffering, still waiting for freedom that might never come. And she made a silent promise to them all. She would make her escape mean something. She would use her freedom to help others find theirs, in whatever way she could. She would teach, and through teaching she would plant seeds of change that might someday grow into something beautiful. The steamboat rounded a bend, and ahead in the distance, she could see the first buildings of Philadelphia rising from the riverbank. Her new home, her new life, her new chance to become someone who mattered not because of her appearance or her family name, but because of what she chose to do with the gifts she'd been given. Celeste Beauregard, no, Celeste Whitmore now, smiled into the wind and felt something she'd never felt before at Belle Rive. She felt like she was coming home. The autumn sun slanted through the windows of the Garrison Academy's main classroom, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. Celeste Whitmore, now 45 years old, and silver threading through her chestnut hair, stood before a class of 30 children ranging in age from 6 to 14. Their faces represented a dozen different backgrounds. The children of Irish immigrants sat beside the children of German merchants, who sat beside the children of freedmen, who sat beside the children of Quaker families. It was the kind of classroom that would have been unthinkable in Louisiana, perhaps still was unthinkable in many places. But here in Philadelphia, in this school, it was simply Tuesday. "Who can tell me," Celeste asked, her voice warm and engaging, "what President Lincoln meant when he said, 'A house divided against itself cannot stand'?" A dozen hands shot up. She called on Thomas, a 12-year-old black boy whose parents had escaped slavery via the Underground Railroad before the war. "He meant that America couldn't keep being half slave and half free," Thomas said confidently. "That we had to choose what kind of country we wanted to be." "Excellent. And what choice did we make?" "Freedom," chorused several voices. "Freedom," Celeste agreed, "though the work of making that freedom real, of making it mean something for everyone, is still ongoing. That's why education matters so much. That's why all of you being here learning together is revolutionary." After class, as the children filed out for their afternoon recess, Patience Garrison appeared in the doorway. She was grayer now, her face more lined, but her eyes were as kind as ever. "Thee has a visitor," Patience said. "A man who says he knew thee in Louisiana." Celeste's heart skipped. In 23 years, no one from her old life had ever sought her out. She'd become Mrs. Whitmore so completely that Celeste Beauregard might as well have died that day she left Belle Rive. Did he give a name? Marcus Freeman. The name hit her like a physical blow. Marcus, after all these years. She followed Patience to the school's small receiving room, her hands trembling slightly. He stood by the window, looking out at the children playing in the yard. He'd aged well. His hair was grey now, his face weathered by time and work, but he stood straight and strong. When he turned at her entrance, his smile was exactly as she remembered. "Miss Celeste," he said, then corrected himself. "Mrs. Whitmore, forgive me, old habits." "Marcus." She crossed the room and took his hands in hers. "Propriety be damned. My God, it's good to see you. You made it. You're here." "We made it," he confirmed. "Sarah and I, Isaiah, 2 more children we had after we settled in Cincinnati. We've been there all these years. I have my carpentry shop just like I dreamed. Small, but it's mine. We're making it work." "I'm so glad," Celeste said, tears threatening. "I'm so glad you found what you were looking for." "We did. And we never forgot that you made it possible." He reached into his coat and pulled out an envelope. "This is why I came. This arrived at our house last month, forwarded through about 6 different addresses. It's from Belle Rive." Celeste's blood went cold. "My mother?" "Your mother died 3 years ago," Marcus said gently. "This is from Jeremiah, or rather, from his wife, Rebecca. Jeremiah passed last year, but before he died, he made Rebecca promise to find us, to find you, to tell you what happened." With shaking hands, Celeste opened the envelope and pulled out several pages of careful script. She read silently, her eyes moving faster as she went, her breath coming shorter. Belle Rive had failed. After Adeline's death, the plantation had been sold to pay debts. The new owners had been even crueler than Adeline, and within 2 years, a fever had swept through the quarters, killing dozens. The survivors had scattered. Some had been sold, some had fled north. Some had simply vanished into the bayou, preferring to take their chances with alligators and starvation rather than endure one more day of bondage. But Rebecca's letter wasn't about tragedy, it was about legacy. "Because of what you did," the letter read, "because you freed those 2 families, because word spread about a white woman who saw us as human beings, people started to believe that change was possible. Small acts of resistance became more common. People started teaching each other to read in secret, hiding books in the quarters, sharing knowledge. When the war came, when Union soldiers arrived, we were ready. We knew our rights. We knew our worth. And when freedom finally came, we weren't helpless. We'd been preparing." The letter went on to detail the lives of people Celeste barely remembered. The cook's daughter who'd become a teacher, the field hand who'd become a preacher, the house girl who'd learned to read and now ran a school for freedmen's children in Baton Rouge. Dozens of small victories, each one a seed planted by that one night of unexpected mercy. "Jeremiah wanted you to know," the letter concluded, "that what you did mattered. That one act of courage, of choosing to see people as people, rippled out further than you could have imagined. You changed lives, Miss Celeste. Maybe you even helped change the world. Just a little bit. Celeste lowered the letter, unable to speak. Marcus waited patiently, understanding the weight of what she'd just read. I didn't do anything extraordinary, she finally whispered. I just refused to let my mother's cruelty define that night. I just tried to be decent. Sometimes that's the most extraordinary thing of all, Marcus replied. In a world built on indecency, on cruelty, normalized and systemized, choosing to be decent is revolutionary. They talked for hours, catching up on 23 years of life. Marcus told her about his children, about his business, about the black community in Cincinnati that had welcomed his family and helped them build a life. Celeste told him about the school, about the hundreds of children she'd taught, about the small ways she tried every day to honor the lesson those two men had taught her in a locked room in Louisiana. Tobias passed away 5 years ago, Marcus said as the afternoon light began to fade. Died free, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. He had a good life after Belle Rive, worked in a mill in Illinois, saved his money, bought a small farm. He used to say that every morning he woke up free was a morning he'd stolen back from slavery. I wish I could have seen him again, Celeste said, told him what he and you gave me that night. He knew, Marcus assured her. He knew because we all knew. We all saw what happened to you, how you changed from that frightened girl hiding in her room to the woman who stood up to her mother, who demanded justice, who made freedom happen for two families. You think we didn't talk about that? You think that story didn't get told and retold in every quarter from Louisiana to Ohio? I had no idea. That's because you were too busy actually doing the work, Marcus smiled. Too busy teaching, helping, making a real difference instead of worrying about your reputation or your legacy. As the sun set and Marcus prepared to return to his hotel before catching the train back to Cincinnati the next morning, he pulled one more thing from his coat, a small wooden bird, intricately carved, perfect in every detail. Tobias made this, he said, placing it in Celeste's palm. Made dozens of them over the years, gave them to people who'd shown him kindness. He made this one for you before he died. Asked me to deliver it if I ever found you. Celeste cradled the tiny sculpture, feeling its weight, its beauty, the love and skill carved into every feather. It's beautiful, she breathed. He said to tell you that you helped him fly, Marcus said softly. That you gave him wings when he thought he'd be chained forever. He wanted you to have a reminder of that. After Marcus left, Celeste sat alone in the classroom as darkness fell, holding the wooden bird and thinking about the strange path her life had taken. From that terrified, ashamed girl in Belle Rive to this, a teacher, a woman who'd found purpose and meaning in helping others learn and grow. She thought about her mother, dead now these 3 years, buried in the Beauregard family plot at Belle Rive. Had Adeline ever regretted that night? Had she ever wondered what happened to the daughter she'd tried so hard to break? Celeste would never know, but she'd made her peace with it years ago. Some relationships couldn't be redeemed, some wounds couldn't be healed. The best you could do was learn from them and become someone better. The next morning, Celeste stood before her class with the wooden bird displayed on her desk. I want to tell you a story, she said, about a night 23 years ago when everything changed, about cruelty and kindness, about chains and freedom, about how sometimes the things that are meant to break us instead make us stronger. The children leaned forward, eager and attentive. She'd learned over the years that the best lessons came from truth, from real stories about real people facing real challenges. So she told them. Not every detail. Some parts were too personal, too painful for children's ears. But she told them about Belle Rive, about the enslaved people she'd finally learned to see as human, about 2 men who'd shown mercy when violence was expected. She told them about choosing freedom over comfort, about finding purpose in service, about how one act of kindness could ripple out across decades. "The work isn't finished," she concluded. "Slavery may be legally ended, but inequality, injustice, cruelty, these things persist. Every day you'll have chances to choose between cruelty and kindness, between seeing people as human or seeing them as less than. The choice you make matters, not just for you, but for everyone your life touches." Thomas raised his hand. "Mrs. Whitmore, are you glad you left? Do you ever wish you'd stayed where it was safe?" Celeste picked up the wooden bird, holding it so the morning sun caught its delicate features. "Safe isn't the same as good," she said, "and comfort isn't the same as happiness. I left behind wealth and status and all the privileges I'd been born with, but I gained something infinitely more valuable." "What?" asked a little girl in the front row. Celeste smiled. "I gained myself. I gained the ability to look in the mirror and know that I was living according to my own values, not someone else's expectations. I gained the knowledge that my life had meaning, that I was contributing something good to the world. And I gained all of you, every student I've taught, every person I've helped, every small difference I've been able to make." She set the bird back on her desk carefully. "That night at Belle Rive, I learned that freedom isn't just about physical chains. It's about the chains we carry in our minds, the ones that tell us who we have to be, how we have to live, what we're worth. Breaking those chains is terrifying, but it's also the only way to really live." The lesson continued, moving into mathematics and history, but Celeste noticed that several students kept glancing at the wooden bird, at this tangible reminder that stories of courage and change were real, that transformation was possible. At day's end, as she erased the chalkboard and prepared for the next morning, Patience appeared again in the doorway. "That was powerful, what they shared today," she said. "The children will remember it." "I hope so," Celeste replied. "I hope they remember that they have power, even when the world tells them they don't, especially then." "Thee has been with us 23 years now," Patience observed. "Has thee ever regretted coming here? Ever wished for thy old life?" Celeste thought about Belle Rive's grand parlours, about silk dresses and servants, about the illusion of gentility built on suffering. Then she thought about this modest classroom, about children of all backgrounds learning together, about the letters she received from former students who'd gone on to become teachers themselves, doctors, activists, ministers, people working to make the world better. "Not once," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment." That evening, Celeste sat in her small room at the boarding house where she'd lived for more than 2 decades. It was simple. A bed, a desk, a bookshelf, a window overlooking the street. Nothing like her bedroom at Belle Rive, with its silk curtains and fine furniture. But it was hers, earned by her own work, maintained by her own effort. She pulled out writing paper and began composing a letter to Rebecca, Jeremiah's widow, still living in Louisiana. She thanked her for the letter, for the information about Belle Rive's fate, for the reminder that small acts of conscience could have lasting impact. She told Rebecca about the school, about the work she was doing, about Marcus's visit and Tobias's gift. "I've often wondered," she wrote, "if I did enough. If freeing 2 families was sufficient payment for a lifetime of privilege built on the backs of enslaved people. The truth is, it wasn't. It could never be enough. But it was something. And something is better than nothing. Something can be the beginning of everything." She told Rebecca about the students, about teaching them that they had power to change the world, about planting seeds that might someday grow into justice. "The night my mother locked me in that room with Tobias and Marcus," she continued, "she thought she was destroying me. She thought she was teaching me a lesson about knowing my place, about accepting the cruelty of the world as natural and inevitable. Instead, those 2 men taught me the opposite. They taught me that kindness is a choice, that dignity cannot be taken, only given away, that seeing each other's humanity is the first step toward freedom. For all of us." She wrote about how that one night, had become the foundation of everything she'd built since. How it had taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act rightly despite it. How it had shown her that real strength came not from power over others, but from connection with them. "I am writing this," she concluded, "so that you can share it with others who remember that night, who heard the stories, who wondered what became of me. Tell them that I am well. Tell them that I have tried to honor what they taught me. Tell them that the seeds they planted in my heart have grown into something I hope they would be proud of. Tell them that I have never forgotten, and I never will." She sealed the letter and set it aside to post in the morning. Then she opened her journal, a habit she'd maintained for 20 years, and began to write. "Today, Marcus Freeman came to see me," she wrote. "After all these years, after all the miles and changes, we found each other again. He brought news of Belle Rive's fall, of Tobias's death, of the ripples that have spread from that one night. And he brought me a gift, a wooden bird carved by a man I once sat with in a locked room, a man who showed me what freedom really means." She continued writing, processing the day's revelations, thinking about legacy and meaning and the strange paths lives could take. "I have taught hundreds of children," she wrote. "I have seen dozens of them go on to do remarkable things, but I wonder sometimes if the most important thing I ever did was simply refuse to participate in cruelty. If my greatest contribution was just choosing to see two men as human beings worthy of dignity and respect. It seems like such a small thing. But Marcus says it mattered. Rebecca's letter says it mattered. And if it mattered to them, then perhaps it mattered enough." She thought about her mother, about that final conversation in Belle Rive's study. Adeline had asked what Celeste would do, where she would go. And Celeste hadn't known. She'd had no clear plan, no certainty about the future. But she'd had something more important. She'd had the courage to step into the unknown rather than remain in comfortable cruelty. "I wish I could tell my younger self," she wrote, "that it would all work out. That the terror of leaving would give way to purpose. That the loneliness would be replaced by community. That the shame she carried would transform into strength. But perhaps she needed to not know. Perhaps the courage only came because she couldn't see the ending, only the next step." As night deepened over Philadelphia, Celeste closed her journal and picked up the wooden bird again. She studied its delicate craftsmanship, imagining Tobias's scarred hands shaping the wood, imagining him thinking about that night, about the girl who'd talked to him like a human being, about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room, to Tobias's memory, to Marcus and Sarah and all the people who'd shown her what courage looked like. "Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for helping me become someone worth being." The next morning was Saturday, and Celeste used her free day to walk through Philadelphia's streets. She passed through neighborhoods where free black families lived alongside white families, where Irish immigrants ran shops next to German bakeries, where Quaker meeting houses stood near Methodist churches and Catholic cathedrals. It wasn't perfect. Prejudice and inequality still existed, still caused suffering. But it was different from Louisiana, different enough to matter. She stopped at a small park where families gathered, watching children play without regard for the color of their skin or the accents of their parents. She saw an elderly black man reading a newspaper openly on a bench, something that would have been illegal in Louisiana, that might have gotten him killed. She saw women walking alone without fear, without shame. And she understood, perhaps more clearly than ever before, why she'd chosen this life. Freedom wasn't just an absence of chains. It was the presence of possibility. It was the ability to become who you were meant to be, not who others demanded you should be. It was the power to make choices based on conscience rather than convention. That afternoon, she returned to the school to prepare for the coming week's lessons. As she entered her classroom, she found Abraham Garrison sitting at her desk, the wooden bird in his hands. "Marcus told me the story," Abraham said gently, "about Belle Rive. about that night, about why thee really came north. Celeste's heart sank. Will it be a problem? For the school? A problem? Abraham set the bird down carefully. Dear friend, it's the reason we wanted thee here in the first place. Thee has lived the lesson we try to teach every day, that all people are equal in God's eyes, that conscience must guide action, that courage matters more than comfort. I thought you didn't know, Celeste admitted. I thought if I could just start over, become someone new. Thee did become someone new, Abraham interrupted, not by hiding who thee was, but by choosing who thee would become. That's the only real transformation there is. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the schoolyard. When we first opened this academy 30 years ago, people said we were mad, that black children and white children couldn't learn together, that it would cause violence, that it violated the natural order of things. But we believed that God's order was different from man's order. We believed that education was a right, not a privilege. And we looked for teachers who believed that too, not just in theory, but in their bones, because they'd lived it. He turned back to Celeste. Thee has been one of our finest teachers precisely because thee knows what it costs to stand up for what's right. Thee knows it in thy body, in thy heart, in thy history, and that makes thee invaluable. Celeste felt tears streaming down her face. I still feel like I didn't do enough. That freeing 2 families wasn't sufficient payment for a lifetime of none of us can undo the past, Abraham said gently. We can only shape the future, and thee has shaped the future of hundreds of children, taught them to see each other as equals, given them tools to build a better world. If that's not enough, I don't know what would be. That Sunday, Celeste attended Quaker meeting for the first time in months. She usually avoided it, uncomfortable with the silence, with the expectation of spiritual revelation. But today, she felt drawn to it, felt the need to sit with the questions that Marcus's visit had raised. The meeting house was plain, as all Quaker spaces were. Simple wooden benches facing each other, no pulpit, no decorations, nothing to distract from the inner light that Quakers believed existed in every person. Celeste sat in the customary silence, listening to the breathing of her neighbors, to the creaking of the building, to her own thoughts. And in that silence, she finally understood something she'd been circling for 23 years. She hadn't been rescued that night in Belle Rive. She'd been awakened. Tobias and Marcus hadn't saved her from anything. They'd shown her how to save herself. By treating her with dignity, by refusing to participate in her mother's cruelty, they'd held up a mirror that let her see her own strength, her own worth, her own capacity for courage. The gift they'd given her wasn't freedom. It was the knowledge that freedom was hers to claim. And everything since, the teaching, the helping, the small daily choices to see people and honor them, all of it was her way of passing that gift forward. Of holding up mirrors for others, so they could see their own strength, their own worth, their own capacity to choose. When the meeting ended and people began to leave, Patience sat down beside Celeste on the bench. "Thee looks peaceful," she observed. "I think I finally understand something," Celeste replied, "about that night, about why it mattered, about what I've been doing all these years." "And what is that, friend? That freedom isn't something we give to each other. It's something we help each other claim. That night, those 2 men didn't free me from my mother or from Belle Rive. They showed me that I was already free. I just needed to recognize it and act on it. And that's what I've been trying to do ever since. Help children recognize their own freedom, their own power, their own light." Patience smiled. "Thee has just described the Quaker faith in a nutshell. The inner light, the truth that exists in all of us, waiting to be recognized." "Maybe I'm more Quaker than I thought," Celeste said. "Maybe thee is exactly what thee was meant to be," Patience replied. "A teacher, a witness, a living reminder that change is possible, that courage matters, that choosing to see each other's humanity is the first step toward everything else." As autumn turned to winter, Celeste settled back into her routines, teaching during the week, preparing lessons on evenings, walking the city on weekends. But something had shifted. Marcus's visit, Rebecca's letter, Tobias's gift. They had given her a perspective on her own life that she'd never had before. She began writing her story. Not for publication. She was too private for that, and too aware of how dangerous it might be for some people if certain truths were revealed. But for herself, for the record, for anyone who might someday want to know that this one woman, in this one place, at this one moment, had chosen differently. She wrote about her childhood at Belle Rive, about growing up fat and ashamed in a world that valued beauty above all else. She wrote about her mother's cruelty, about the casual violence of slavery, about learning not to see the suffering around her. She wrote about that terrible night when everything changed, about Tobias and Marcus, about discovering that kindness was more powerful than cruelty, that dignity couldn't be taken, only given away. She wrote about leaving, about the journey north, about finding purpose in teaching. She wrote about her students, about the small victories and the persistent challenges, about trying to plant seeds that might someday grow into justice. And she wrote about what she'd learned, that transformation was possible, that people could change, that systems built on cruelty could be dismantled, one choice at a time, that freedom was something you claimed, not something you were given. "I am writing this in 1869, she concluded, 23 years after I left Belle Rive. I am 45 years old. I have never married. I have no children of my own. By the standards of the world I was born into, I am a failure, a spinster, a woman without family or status, living in a boarding house and earning a modest salary teaching other people's children. But by my own standards, I am rich beyond measure. I have work that matters. I have students who will go on to change the world. I have friendships built on mutual respect rather than social obligation. I have the knowledge that I live according to my own conscience, not anyone else's expectations. And I have the memory of two men who showed me what freedom looks like, who taught me that mercy is stronger than cruelty, that kindness is braver than violence, that seeing each other's humanity is the beginning of everything. If I could go back and tell my 22-year-old self anything, I would tell her this: the night you think will destroy you will actually save you. The moment you think you're at your lowest will be the moment you discover your strength. The thing you think is your greatest shame, your body, your difference, your inability to fit into the world you were born into, will become your greatest gift, because it will teach you empathy, it will teach you courage. It will teach you that being different is not the same as being less. I would tell her, hold on, just hold on. The darkness will pass, the dawn will come, and when it does, you'll discover that you were always strong enough, always brave enough, always worthy enough. You just needed to see yourself through kinder eyes. I would tell her, the story they're telling you about who you should be is a lie. The real story, your story, is so much better than you can imagine. And it starts the night everything changes, the night your mother tries to break you and two enslaved men choose mercy instead. That night will echo through decades. It will change lives you'll never meet. It will plant seeds that will grow long after you're gone. And it will prove something that the world doesn't want to believe, that one person making one choice in one moment can matter more than wealth, more than status, more than beauty, more than all the things they told you made a life worth living. What makes a life worth living is using your freedom to help others find theirs. And that I have tried to do. That I will keep doing until my last breath. That is my story. That is what happened the night my mother sent two men to break me, and they showed me mercy instead. Nobody believed it could be true, but it was. And it changed everything.